Thank you, everybody. I am the first speaker this year for this program, I understand. That's a big honor. And the topic of the talk today is, well, it was education, pay attention. And then on the way over here, I actually did pencil it in, pay attention to change. Because definitely there's some changes going on. I want to ask your indulgence of me this morning to just give me your attention for, say, the next 15 minutes. Pay attention. And by the end of our talk, I'm going to let you know how this talk could be worth at least $1 million to you. And if you want to ask questions after the presentation, that'll be after I give you that information. We are going to have some time to do that as well. I want to start with today. Today is November 22nd. And honestly, I don't know if you guys, do you know what today is? Anybody?
No. Oh, it's the anniversary of JFK's death?
That's right. It was 48 years ago today. I was in the second grade. I was in Our Lady Queen of Martyrs Grammar School in New York City. And it was a pretty big deal. I was 7 years old. It was a pretty big deal because JFK was the first and still has been the only Roman Catholic president of the United States. So in the Catholic school, the nuns that were my teachers and the priests that were in the rectory next door, it was not a good day, November 22nd. For most of you, 9/11 happened at about the same age that I was when John F. Kennedy was shot. So your world changed on 9/11. My world changed on November 22nd, 1963. But two other events happened while you were getting your so-far education since 9/11. They happened in slow motion, so you may not have noticed them, and you probably didn't have the same perspective on them as I did, and that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. First, since you started your education, the world has become really a much smaller place. The internet, for the most part, you've probably never not known, like Facebook and Twitter. You've probably never not known cell phones, text messaging. In terms of making the world a smaller place, the internet and cell phones are pretty much equal. They're part of the same global communications network that has really made the world a much smaller place. And there's a really good book called The World is Flat. It's by Thomas Friedman. It talks about what I'm talking about now in much greater detail than you probably want to hear about now. But it's really a good book if you want to read it. The thumbnail sketch of that book is that this communications network that I'm mentioning to you is now available to people all over the world, even in small, undeveloped areas. They're able to have cell phones and the internet. And so that's created a huge change just in the way the world works. And I'm going to get to how that affects you. I'll give you an example of that. Right now, I am managing for a client an advertising campaign that targets specifically and only 7 emerging African nations. And I can do that from Panera Bread in Greenbrier on my laptop. And I know what you're saying, so. But the way that I think about it is if I can help this company compete with local people in Kenya, say, that are trying to get investment dollars in Kenya, then what stops a company in Canada or Croatia from offering services to us or to people in Europe? And the answer is nothing. And then, I know what you're saying, so what? You know, big deal. But you really have to ask yourself, if that's all true, then where are all the jobs going? And you need to pay attention to the answers, because that's the change that I'm talking about. And you really have to have that on your mind as you pursue your education. I mentioned that there were 2 events that happened while you were getting educated so far. And the other one is, besides that the world became a smaller place, is that the United States has really had a change in status in our economic standing. And it may be, you know, if you watch the news, what they call it in the media is the housing bubble. That's an easy explanation for what's going on, and it's pretty complicated. I will say that it's different The United States economic standing is different, and there are more changes to come. Without getting into a philosophical discussion on why that is or the details of that, let's just say, okay, well, that's true. And I know at this point you're thinking, well, it's some old guy up here who is giving us a history lesson. This is supposed to be about education. But as I mentioned a few minutes ago, the topic of this is education. Pay attention to the changes. And if you let me get there, I'll explain why what I'm talking about is important to every single one of you. I want to back up a little bit. We were talking about what's happened since you've begun your educational process. I was thinking last night what happened while I was in grade school. It was pretty amazing. After John F. Kennedy got shot, before I graduated from high school, we had the civil rights movement. Unfortunately, we had a few more assassinations with Martin Luther King Jr. and Bobby Kennedy. We had students who were protesting the war in Vietnam, who were actually shot down by the National Guard at Kent State University. 4 of them got killed. And that's all while I was in school, while I was your age. And then in 1974, 1971, the Vietnam War was coming to a close. And then it was after Vietnam, it was relatively calm environment for me until 9/11, until what happened when you were a little bit younger, when you first started your education. And to give you a little context, I'm going to give you a little bit of my professional background. I started in broadcasting when I was about your age. I began in radio, but I went on to be a producer of radio and television commercials. Took a little bit of a left turn in the 1980s. I was the manager of the largest nightclub in Long Island. It was a multi-million-dollar business. I had about 100 employees at any given time, which meant that I was always hiring, I was always firing, I was always training. And that was a very interesting job. But when my daughter was born in 1992, I came back to broadcasting. I ended up winning the highest award in radio advertising, which is called the Mercury Award. Actually, I won it for doing a jingle and a commercial for the Radio Advertising Bureau. It was a contest, and I won the contest, but it was great. But that award led me to a higher-paying job in Norfolk at a radio station called The Point, which is actually still on the air. Some of you have heard of it. About 15 years ago, I had the opportunity to walk away from a full-time job and open up my own business. It was a web development business. And I've owned several technology companies since then. Some of them I've owned outright with offices and employees. Some of them I've owned with other investors, and I've managed the company. A few years ago, for example, I was the CEO of a technology company in Norfolk that was doing $1.7 million in business. We had, I think, 12 employees. And that was about the time that I was appointed. It's called JCOTS, but nobody knows that. The Joint Commission, Virginia Joint Commission on Technology and Science Advisory Committee, was a real feather in my cap as the owner of a technology company because it gave me a lot of credentials. My current business has 1 employee, and I am it. And there are at least 2 good reasons for that, and I gave them to you already. The first one is that I have run my businesses at a range of sizes. Sometimes, like I said, with an actual office and with employees. At other times, I have run a virtual company with a post office box and a few websites. That's what I'm doing right now. As conditions in the market change, I have been able to scale up and scale down my businesses. And that's important. The second is this economic condition that I was telling you about. In the U.S. and around the world, it's becoming unstable at the moment. And with just myself, I eliminate the need to hire, and more importantly, because it's more expensive, train employees. If you train somebody, they may or may not work out, and so it's a big gamble. And in a shrinking economy, it's what I call a sucker bet, because you don't know if the person's going to work out, you don't really know if you need them or not, and they may or may not work out, so you move on. In an expanding economy, then it's a safe bet to hire people and train them, because eventually you're going to catch, and somebody's going to come in and have the right credentials and do the right job, and your business will grow. So the point is, and my advice to all of you, is to pay attention to your education and take a broad view. When I was growing up, they called that street smarts. So or situational awareness if you're a military family person. But your competition for any given job could be someone who lives in this town or somebody who lives in a different city. They could be from some other country. You face competition from people who maybe they have studied and maybe they do well on tests, so they have good grades on their resume, but they may not have a really good vision about how the real world works. And so that's why I think that for you, it would be a really good idea for you to have at least a second choice for what you may want to do in your professional life, other than what you really love to do, which should always be your first choice. Because if you're prepared now, if you have a plan B now, you'll always be one step ahead. Everybody else that you're competing with, and you are, and the competition is pretty wide now, everybody else you're competing with possibly does have a plan B, possibly has studied a little bit more, a little differently, or took easier classes and has a different grade for their resume. So I think that if you take a step back and take a look at everything around you, it is a little less overwhelming to think about where am I now, where am I going. The other thing that I would tell you is you need to know how to operate a computer for more than Facebook. You don't have to be a programmer, but you do know how to work Microsoft Office, and the more you know about computers, the better to compete with other folks who are in the market who do know, who have spent time on the computer not doing things like playing games. All right, that $1 million I told you about. These are the current stats from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics as of Thursday, October 20th, 2011, which was the latest, most recent date that they had available. It's by educational attainment, full-time workers aged 25 and older, without a high school diploma, the median weekly income, $459. If you graduate high school but you don't go to college, median income, $636. If you hold just at least a bachelor's degree, the median weekly earnings, $1,152. And if you have an advanced degree, like a professional degree or a master's degree or above, the highest 10% earnings in males in that category, $3,131 a week. By the way, for you young ladies, you're going to have to even work a little bit harder, even though you're already a little smarter. Women earn about a third less than men, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. So you already got a strike against you, and it's still, and so you have to work just that much harder and outsmart these guys, which I know you're fully capable of. So, you know. So that's my time, with enough time left over to answer your questions. The lifetime earnings capacity, if you have a bachelor's degree, is $2 million more than if you just have a high school diploma. $2 million more with just a bachelor's degree. So that's why I was saying that if you pay attention, you could earn a little bit of money. Thank you. Are there any questions? Oh, I must be like more boring than I thought.
Somebody has a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So, what college did you go to?
I did not go to college. I went to the School of Hard Knocks. Really, the truth is that the position I found myself in high school was I went to Winter Haven High School in Winter Haven, Florida. Went from New York City to a little redneck town in Florida. So I wasn't particularly enjoying high school, but then I got kind of lured into broadcasting because I was on the radio and had a good job on the radio. Now I made up for that. I did take some college classes, but I don't have a degree. I have read a lot, and that is a much harder way to go, and it took me a lot longer. When I found out that was not such a good move was when I was probably about 28, and I was going nowhere in broadcasting. I was a sales manager, and that was all I was ever going to be, because other guys were coming in and becoming the manager who were not as experienced or even as smart as I was, but they had a degree. So that was an excellent question. It's almost like the glass ceiling that women face in terms of if you don't have an education, you can only go but so high. Women face that not as extreme, obviously, as the difference between a college education and not. You still earn a little less than men, but you're in the marketplace. But if you don't have a college education, and I've hired and fired, I can't tell you how many people. I look at someone differently if they present themselves well and they have a college education on the resume. It's like a category. At a point, it doesn't even matter what their degree is in. Just did they make that effort? Did they get past high school and do something else and have some conversational skills and are neat and might represent my company well? So really is important, and that was a great question.
I have a question for you. If you could go back to school right now, what would you study?
I would study probably marketing, because that's the one area that has the most change. We've gone from a traditional media of like newspaper and magazines and radio to digital marketing, which can be a lot of things. It could be your cell phone or the internet or Facebook. So there's more opportunity, I think, in marketing as a skill than there would be, say, in political science, for example, or liberal arts. Really hard to get a job with a liberal arts degree. More fun in school, but you're not going to get paid for it.
Any other questions? Somebody has to have one.
I know what you're asking. The name of the nightclub.
Yes.
It was called Chevy's. It was in West Islip, New York, which is in the south central part of Long Island, and we had about 2,500 people a night, 3 nights a week. That was crazy. But I made it. 8 years.
Any other questions?
What is it?
Oh, I just, I have done a lot of public speaking, and so I always check myself so that I know, if I do a lot of kind of thing. Because when you're actually up here talking, you don't know. I've got notes, but I don't know what I sound like. So I just use that for that.
Would you explain to them the importance of public speaking and making sure that, at least at the community college level, they take that course?
That is a really good point. The main way that I compensated for not having a college education was to be articulate. And that was an extension of my broadcasting. So I was on the radio. I was a DJ in the beginning, and then I was a news guy, a journalist. In my career, total career, I've probably given 1,000 talks. And the way that I present myself, the words that I choose, the lack of uhs when I'm able to do it, gives me an appearance to the audience of a certain level of not just expertise, but education and hipness in some cases. If you can speak, then people listen. And if you're average, you blend in. So it is, even in a interview situation, in a one-on-one with a potential employer, it is just mission critical for you to be able to speak well. So public speaking is, I think, probably one of the, should be a class that you absolutely positively take. Yes?
I interned at a radio station this summer, and I'm thinking about going back again this summer, or coming summer. What other skills besides public speaking does radio offer that you know?
That's it's a different world than the world that I was in when I started in radio. Is March of 1974, so probably before you were born. They allowed people on the radio to speak whatever they were thinking. Now you have to read it off of a card and somebody else writes it. They allowed you to pick the records. They were actually records and not CDs. They were actually 45 records. So you're asking a hard question because it's a different business. Right now, you can almost automate everything at a local radio station except for the weather and traffic. And it would be hard for the listener, if it was presented well, to tell the difference. I think the thing to get out of broadcasting is not actually being on the air, but seeing how promotions run, seeing how sales are made, how the radio station actually makes its money, which is not playing the records. It is by selling radio ads, how that technology works, what the radio station's website is doing in terms of bringing in money to the company and why. I think that anything at a radio station except talking on the radio and playing music is probably important, because every radio station has somebody talking on it and plays something, whether it's one kind of music or another. The difference is how much money are they making, and then how much money are you making? Well, thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate your time.